So we're going to talk a little bit about how venture capital works and specifically about how startups get funded and what the economics of it look like. So how many of you, drop in the help channel, have ever worked for a startup before? Either bootstrapped or venture backed. If you've done that, go ahead and drop a note. I know a couple have, but I don't think it's that too terribly many. Cool. So we got a few people that have worked at startups. I am going to share my screen. And like I said, we're going to look at, first of all, how startups get funded, which is one of the most important aspects. So let's look at VCs, or what's known as venture capital. There's a graph that I want to find here. But basically, venture capital is the main way that startups get funded. So most startups, including Lambda School, are funded to some degree by investors. Where is that image? Right here. And my computer was struggling, so I'm on my wife's computer. So if you see Pinterest everywhere, that's why. So we are right here on the entrepreneur side. So Ben and I, when we started Lambda School, we had a pretty good idea of, I do like Pinterest. Actually, I know a lot of the early employees and the founders of Pinterest pretty well. We're funded by the same people, it turns out. So basically how it works is you're an entrepreneur. You have some crazy idea like, hey, what if we started a code school that was entirely free until people got a job? How would we do that? How would we fund it? Well, we'd need, a small office. We'd need people working. We'd need instructors. So at the end of the day, you need a little bit of money. And the main way you get that is through venture capitalists. So venture capitalists, you can think of venture capitalists or VCs as very, very specified money managers. So the same way there are people on Wall Street that trade stocks or bonds or whatever, venture capitalists, they invest in startups and they want really crazy returns from startups. So a VC will go to either wealthy individuals or a bigger fund. So that could be endowments, pensions, retirement funds, and any of that kind of thing, or just individuals with a high net worth, and they will pool a bunch of capital. So I'll show you guys some of who our investors are, just because I think that'll be interesting for you guys. And then we'll track that back a little bit to how they got their money and where that money started out, and kind of trace it back and see how your education was funded. So let's take, for example, a fund that is called Liquid 2. So Liquid 2 was one of our first investors. It was started by a football player by the name of Joe Montana, who was very successful and very wealthy. And he just started investing in tech startups because he thought it was cool. So he, for a while, was his own LP. So if you're a venture capitalist, you get paid. So you get paid on what's called 20 and 2. So they'll get a 2% management fee. So however big the fund they raise is, they take 2% just for being awesome, just for being VCs. That's kind of their set pay cut. And then they take 20% of the carry. So in other words, if I invest $1 and I make $10 from that investment, I get to keep $2 of that. And then they'll have a team full of people that do a bunch of things. So I'm Joe Montana. I am an angel investor, which means somebody that writes checks directly into startups. But I want to do a little bit more than what I can with my own personal net worth. So Joe Montana, he becomes a venture capitalist. He goes out to both wealthy individuals, private investors, and other funds. So those could be investment bankers, and he will raise a round of funding. So I think Joe's his last fund was $100 million. Of that $100 million, he'll then allocate it to something like 20 startups. So he gets to pick 20 startups over 10 years, and he'll seed them all with a small investment. And then what the company, you're essentially selling a percentage of the company for cash. So, with Lambda School, we've raised a couple $1,000,000 and we've sold a certain percentage of the company for that couple $1,000,000. And then with that, we hire instructors, we pay TAs, we keep lights on. We do all of that stuff so that we can train you guys. Then what happens is a startup grows really big and gets bought or IPOs, which is when they go and list themselves on the stock exchange. And they basically start selling some of their stock, and the venture capitalists take a portion of that. So the reason this works, we're going to look at something called portfolio theory. And basically, actually, let's look at VC portfolio theory. So this is what a VC's return looks like. So most of the time, VCs actually lose their money. They lose money on at least 5 out of 10 deals. It just goes to zero, and they plan on that, and that's okay. Then 3 to 4 of 10 companies will return their money, or they'll return a little bit. So if I'm a VC and I invest $1 million, maybe I'll make $2 million. But almost all of the money in venture capital is made from this tiny power law 1%. Those are the Ubers, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Amazons, and that's why you hear so much about those companies and so little about the hundreds of other profitable companies. So, to give you an idea of some of the returns, a guy named Naval Ravikant, he invested $25,000 in Uber. He was the first money into Uber, and that $25,000 is now worth over $100 million. Peter Thiel, I think he put $500,000 into Facebook. That's worth, I want to say, 2 or 3 billion now. So the return profile for a few of these companies makes up for anything else. So Naval could have invested $25,000 in 1,000 companies and lost it all, and still made his money back and then some from one Uber investment. So that's kind of how portfolio theory works. And not a lot of people understand that. The VCs really only care about this 1% chance of a company going really, really big. So when they invest in a company, they're not actually saying the value of the company. So when a company is valued at $16 million, for example, that's not necessarily the company itself is worth $16 million, but that's basically saying we think there's a 1.6 chance that this company will become a $1 billion company. And that is kind of how startups work. So if we look at the different funding rounds, these are kind of losing their meaning as time goes along. But for a long time, you would have a friends and family round, and that would be when you go to people you know and you raise, we'll say, $50,000 just to get things off the ground. For a long time, a seed round was something like $10 million, $20 million, because back in the day, you had to have a lot of money just to have a server and just to have something up and on the internet. The amount that people raise in seed rounds has come down drastically. So now a seed round can be anything from $500,000 to, let's say, a bigger seed round is something like $3 million. And then after a seed round, you raise a Series A, and that basically, if you have really good metrics, you can go out and raise again. So roundish numbers will say a seed round right now is a couple million, up to 3 million. A Series A is something like 8 to 11 million. And then there are series, I think Uber is one of the biggest companies. It's now on like a Series G or something crazy like that. And they're raising tens of billions of dollars with their Series G. So that's kind of how it breaks out. And then one of the other interesting things about startups that isn't true anywhere else is that early employees will usually get a chunk of equity as well. So the Lambda School employees all get a small percentage of the company just for working for Lambda School. And they get a salary as well, but you can kind of negotiate whether you want heavy equity or heavy salary. And I know a lot of people that have done really, really well being an early employee. So we'll take Pinterest, for example. I know one employee number 5 at Pinterest. So he got a small stake in Pinterest and worked there for 6 years. And that stake is now worth, I want to say, $25 million just by being early in a startup. He probably didn't get paid as much as he could have, but that's why startups work. Everybody's incentivized to make things work. Let's jump into questions because I've been rambling a lot. What questions do you guys have? How do incubators work? Yeah, my tweet from earlier today. So let's answer Antonio's question first about seed round in Silicon Valley being like Series A in Utah. So not all of the markets are the same, and coming out of Y Combinator and coming with good metrics in, Lambda School was able to raise quite a bit of money for not very much dilution, which is to say the percentage that you sell to investors. So if you're in Utah, for example, because the investment scene is very different there, a traditional seed round is something like you'd raise $1.5 million and you'd have a $4 million valuation. So basically you're selling a fourth of the company thereabouts for that first $1.5 million. And then if you did really well, you would be able to raise a Series A. You might raise another couple $1 million at something like a 10 or a $15 million valuation. Right now, things are pretty frothy in Silicon Valley, so it's not crazy for a company to raise $3 million that's 6 months old on a $10 million valuation or a $15 million valuation, even though the company is only 3 months old. So that's what I meant by that. In Silicon Valley, you can come out and raise. That's one of the reasons Silicon Valley works, is because employees, the VCs in Silicon Valley really understand this power law, and they understand that they're not actually buying the valuation of the company, they're buying the likelihood that the company becomes a billion-dollar company. So we had literally had people that were sending me Facebook messages saying, hey, give me your bank account information, I'll send you money, and then you can tell me how much that's worth later, but I just want to be involved. So those are people that really, really, they just want to get into 1,000 different companies. And they don't really care about the company itself. They just want to be involved in the off chance that it becomes really, really big. And then let's see, we'll talk about incubators and Y Combinator. So incubators, they came in kind of at this friends and family stage, and they said, that's not very efficient to raise money from friends and family. Instead, let's say we'll give you, so this is how Y Combinator works. They give you something like $120,000, just enough to build a product and kind of get things off the ground, and then they take 7% of the company. But Y Combinator will do that with anywhere. It started out with 7 companies. Now they're doing 100 companies. There are a lot of other incubators, not any of them that I'm aware of Most of them are something like $20,000 for 7%. So it's just, the idea is to give you just enough money to get things up and running before, and to let you prove yourself, and then you can go raise a seed round. So yeah, it basically is a shotgun approach. And Y Combinator is very different. They stand out from the pack by quite a lot. So Y Combinator has, I think over the years, so they've been running for almost 10 years now, and the companies that they've invested in are worth, publicly, I think it's $80 billion. Privately, I think it's up above $100 billion. And it's cost them like $100 million to invest in all of those companies. So Y Combinator does just astoundingly well. And they have done so well that it's now kind of a signal to investors. If you're NYC, that means you're a really good company. And Y Combinator only accepts, I think it's less than 1% of total applications. And then in addition to that, Y Combinator has a pretty tight network. So as a Y Combinator founder, I know the email address of every other YC company founder. I can talk to them. They'll talk to me. There's an internal social network for Y Combinator founders that we can post on. So we'll be utilizing that a lot. If any of you guys want to work in the Bay Area and want to work at a startup, we can post on there stuff like, hey, here are the list of 15 people that are looking to get hired this month from Lambda School. Here are their qualifications, and people will reach out. That's actually how I got one of my first jobs, is somebody posted it on Y Combinator's internal social network. Is it at all like Silicon Valley in real life? I cannot watch the second season of Silicon Valley because it's too realistic. That fundraising part where they're going around and trying to nag all the VCs, it's very much like that. I mean, obviously Silicon Valley is a parody, but what it parodies is very real. And then how do you get VCs to even hear your pitch? Is it a who you know deal? Yes, it is a 100% who you know deal. So Y Combinator is a little bit different. So at the end of Y Combinator, we had what we call Demo Day, which is when there is basically a room full of 700 investors, and you get up there and pitch and tell them what you're doing, and they have basically a like button. And if they like your company, then you can swap information. And it's kind of like Tinder for startups a little bit. It's kind of really weird. And then at the end of the day, you rank the VCs you want to meet in order of how much you want to meet them. And then they do the same to the founders and the companies. And then there's an algorithm that will line everybody up. And the next day you have 15 meetings in a row, kind of speed dating style, with all of the VCs that you matched with. So it's this really crazy Shark Tanky world. Everybody's just going around. And I mean, there are crazy stories that happen at Demo Day because there's just so much money in the room. I mean, last year they had an Arab prince that just came and would just walk around with $100,000 checks and hand them to people. And then he jumped on his private jet and flew away, and nobody ever heard from him again. So that's on the craziest side. Most of it is just people that want to find good investments, and Y Combinator has proven to be the place where all of those happen. So if you were an early employee at a company and took a bunch of equity and the company failed, you'd come away with nothing. Yeah, so that's the risk that you take. If you take a percentage of a company and that company goes to zero, you have a percentage of zero. Why did Y Combinator choose Lambda over the other boot camps, or decide to give another boot camp in their portfolio a shot? Yeah, that's a really good question. It really came down to two things. The first is that we feel like we're addressing a completely unmet market. So almost every boot camp out there is going after people that can afford to pay $20,000. And that market is it's a big market, but there are a lot of players in it. Whereas us being willing to take the risk on students without having them pay anything, and really put our money where our mouths are, that we don't get paid unless we get you guys jobs. That's a big deal, and that's a very different model that changes a lot of different things. And then there's also the fact that we are online, which lets us reach people without having to go and open 15 more offices. Online is probably more difficult to do from the get-go because we're not all sitting in the same room. So we all have to figure out how to work around that, which I think we're doing pretty well. I think everybody is, it's working, right? People are learning stuff. You guys, and we don't talk about this very much, but even compared to the other boot camps that you see out there, Lambda School is just really, really hard. So if you guys can just mostly survive through Lambda School, you're going to be head and shoulders above students from other boot camps. That's something we should probably talk about a lot more, because our first 3 or 4 weeks of material covers what some boot camps cover in their entire 3 months. So we go hard and we go fast, and we're creating the Navy SEALs of code boot camps. And that's something we very intentionally wanted to do. We don't want a bunch of mediocre graduates, and I don't think you guys want to be mediocre either. So it is very difficult, and I'm sure you guys noticed that, but I promise you it will be worth it when it comes time to look for a job. Can you describe the ideal future of Lambda School? So the ideal future of Lambda School, we'd like to de-risk it even more for students. Eventually, we'd love to provide some sort of housing stipend. We are, in the next few months, going to double the amount of Lambda School staff. So we want more hands-on, one-on-one time than we already have, which is expensive to do, because obviously people that are good enough to be engineers are good enough to be teachers have other options. So you have to pay those folks well. But yeah, I think that's part of how we see it. All of that will come with a lot of risk that we have to figure out. That's what we really have to figure out on our end, how we can get the right people to join Lambda School, to extend opportunities that have never existed. I think most of you guys, maybe this isn't true for everybody, but there are a lot of folks that most of you probably wouldn't be attending a boot camp or having this kind of education if it cost $20,000 up front. So we're trying hard to make that level of education accessible to everyone. And that is really important to us. That's really the entire purpose of Lambda School. Let's see. Yeah, Make School is another school that is a Y Combinator company. I actually had dinner with those guys and Hack Reactor and Holberton last night. So their big problem is that they are in a physical location, so they can only accept a few students, and they can't grow beyond that without drastically increasing how much they spend. So we are online because we don't want all of you guys to have to move to San Francisco for 2 years, because that's just as expensive as the $20,000 you would pay for a boot camp anyway. Let's see. Yeah, it would have been impossible. Yeah, let's do this. If you, on John's comment in the help channel, say, like, if it would have been impossible for you to pay to go to a code boot camp, mention that, just because I'm curious. Or, I don't know, maybe that's too personal. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of people wouldn't be able to have this level of education without us doing what we're doing. So that's why we're here. What criteria are investors using to qualify companies when looking at companies to invest in? Do they look at leadership management more, or tech and ideas? It really varies company to company. And those two aren't related, because a lot of the best companies are created by the best founders. So Um, that's just kind of how it works. Um, do so they look at a couple of things. They look at how big a company could possibly grow, how big of an impact it has, how much of differentiation it has from other companies. I mean, basically, they're just looking any way that they can to find who is likely to be that billion-dollar company. Um, and I think that's mostly what they're looking for. Um, do you ever think about offering something similar for other countries? Yeah, we're um, going to. Yeah, I don't know how much we should talk about, but we did take a strategic investment from a couple Asian firms, and we'll be partnering with some Asian universities to hopefully bring that to Asia to some degree. But that won't be for a couple of years because our focus is definitely on making our school the best we can for you guys. Make the best. We really want the best education in the world to be entirely free and accessible to everyone. And that's a win-win. That's not, nobody loses when that happens. So the term unicorn just means a company that's valued at $1 billion or more. So that's what that is describing. Yeah, it looks like for a lot of you, I can see 23 check marks. It would have been impossible to pay for a boot camp. Yeah, I mean, quitting jobs, moving to the Bay Area, paying $20,000, all of that is really expensive. And we want to extend opportunity to folks that wouldn't have otherwise had it. How is having a Lambda accreditation perceived outside of your hiring partners? Well, one of the interesting things is you guys are going to create the brand for Lambda School. So Lambda School will be known by how quality its graduates are. And that word spreads very quickly, which is why we've been very selective in who we've picked. And we make Lambda School really difficult. So we know that if you can make it through this curriculum, and if you can just keep your head above water, even though it's really difficult, that you will be in a really good spot. So, we're kind of betting on you guys, that you guys will be able to go out there and show that Lambda School works, and that the people that come from Lambda School are smart and intelligent. I think a lot of you guys would be shocked to talk to grads from other boot camps. And some of you are grads from other boot camps, but there's just a world of difference. I mean, we don't even see you guys as boot camp grads anymore. You're just heads and shoulders above where you would be anywhere else. Let's see. Yeah, the Bay Area is an expensive place to live. Somebody was asking about working at a startup. So the way I would describe working at a startup is, and I love it, you show up in a room with a bunch of really smart people and a task that seems almost impossible, and then you just do everything you can to make it happen. There's usually not much of like an ecosystem. There's not much management. It's just kind of, let's get all the brightest people we can in one room and try to make something really cool happen. That's why I love startups. Boredom punctuated by panic. There's not much boredom when it comes to startups, at least the ones that I've been in. It's pretty hectic. I mean, you guys should talk to Ben sometime about what it took him to help us get Lambda School off the ground. So neither Ben or I took a salary for a really long time. So we were just kind of living on savings, and Ben would be up literally at the computer, either teaching or preparing curriculum 14, 15 hours a day for months straight, including weekends. Like, he just literally didn't stop for months. And that was the only way we could get Lambda School off the ground. Now you guys are seeing the results of that and some of the fruits, which is good because it's not hectic and insane anymore. But it's, yeah. If you want to work for a startup, one of the most important things I want you guys to all have is solid technical mentorship. Because as good as Lambda School will create engineers, it still won't be the same. Like you still will want somebody that really understands tech that can help you continue to learn and grow as a developer. I mean, most code boot camps, they really kind of teach you the basics and then shove you out the door and then hope that you can figure it out on the job. We want to go a lot deeper, and you'll be a much more competent developer. You'll be able to build things on your own for sure and understand what's happening. But it's still really helpful to have a good mentor there to help and guide you, especially in your first years. So if you can find a startup that has that and you want to work in a startup, that's awesome. Let's see. Ty didn't know that Ben lacks sleep. Yeah, Ben's a hero in my eyes. I can't believe he literally didn't take a day for, it was at least 4 or 5 months until we finally brought some other people on to help him out. So Ben's a champion. Are there any schools that you know that would accept Lambda credits if we decide to pursue a university degree? So accreditation, which is what you're really asking about, is an insane process that was created in the 1940s by a bunch of PhDs that has not been reviewed since and makes so little sense that nobody takes it seriously, but everything works according to it. So some of the requirements for being accredited is you have to be 4 years long. You have to teach X amount of liberal arts. You have to teach X amount of math. Now they're kind of removing some of the math requirements because people are failing. So they're just going to get rid of them. But yeah, accreditation comes with a whole lot of other stuff, including you have to have most of your professors have to have PhDs in something. It's just crazy. So we're actually going to be working toward accreditation as Lambda School, or at least a portion of Lambda School will have accreditation, so we can extend credits retroactively. But that's a long, nasty, expensive process. Like, it's going to cost us millions and millions of dollars to do that. So there's some classes that will let you test out, just saying, hey, if you can solve this code challenge, we'll give you credit. But outside of that, right now, Lambda School won't be applicable to anything else. ICOs. Are ICOs getting popular in the Valley? They're interesting. And there's a lot of money flowing into ICOs for reasons that I don't understand entirely. There are very few venture-backed, seen as more legitimate companies that are completing ICOs because the regulatory framework of ICOs is very up in the air. So our Y Combinator lawyers have said basically don't do anything with ICOs yet because we don't know how the SEC or the FTC or the CFPB is going to react to ICOs. There's a lot of question marks. So the people with a little bit more to lose and a little bit of cash in the bank and that could have regulatory bodies crack down aren't really ICOing, but there's a lot of money flowing into ICOs any other way. Yeah, ICO. Your thoughts on entrepreneurs that build startups with the end goal of getting acquired or making a ton of money? I think it's great. I think that's how the economy works. So if you look at, let's go back to, how do I get rid of this guy? Go back to this. The reason that capitalism works is because we have all of these rich people here that have their money with investment banks or private investors, and eventually it funnels back down to the people that are creating new things. So we have, everybody from Chinese billionaires to probably some of your parents' 401ks are indirectly invested in Lambda School. Not very much of them, but basically how it works is if I'm an investment banker, let's say I have an endowment and I need to invest $5 billion worth of assets. So I have $5 billion worth of investments. I might carve up, well, let's say 5% and give that to some VC, and then the VC is going to funnel it back into entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs are what causes all of the growth and what makes everything else work. So if you look at like the kind of more Marxian philosophy of the people that have capital will just hold on to it and then everything will fall apart. Well, that's not true, because the people that have a lot of money funnel it back into the things that are getting started. So obviously I'm biased, but I consider it a noble thing to do. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure of when we created Lambda School is that you are free to start a company, and our income share agreement does not require you to go work somewhere if it makes the most sense for you to start a company. So yeah, since we're just looking at your taxes, you can go do whatever you want, and you are not indentured servitude servants to anybody. You go do what is best. Let's see. Will Lambda give us advice? We want to start our own company? Yeah, I'll be around. I'm happy to help any of you guys. Let's see. When you sell ownership to VCs, can you ever get that ownership back? Only if you want to buy it back. And that gets expensive, because as the value of the company goes up, the value of what the investors will want for it goes up. So the vast majority of the time, when you sell percentage of a company to VCs, they keep it. What will the future of Lambda School's curriculum look like depending on popular technology changes? So let me talk a little bit about why we structured Lambda School the way we have, and why the classes that we have are what they are. So basically, we see our role as moving people into the highest income jobs they can in society as quickly as we can. So we started with software engineering because despite what you may hear, there's still a huge shortage of qualified, talented developers. And you can go from knowing next to nothing about code to making six figures in 3-6 months. And that's crazy. That's never been true before in the history of the human race. And so we're also looking at other fields and other places where that is also true. And those are almost all in technology. So the classes that we're going to be rolling out, which are machine learning and artificial intelligence, cryptography, security, and cryptocurrency, as well as bioinformatics, and then data science. And we'll make all of those freely available to you guys to audit. You guys can view all the archives for free as Lambda School students. We're basically looking to move people into higher paying roles. And so we're looking at places where there's much more demand for employees than there is. We'll continue, at least in the beginning, going into any field where that is the case and training people to get basically really high paying jobs. And then as you have a high paying job, you can learn other stuff. And that's, some of those courses are meant specifically for engineers. So it'd be really hard for you to take Lambda School's, cryptography course if you didn't have a background in engineering. But we really see ourselves, similarly to how VCs invest in entrepreneurs, we see ourselves as investing in you guys. So whatever we can do to make you guys get higher paying jobs, to make you guys more valuable in the workplace, a small fraction of that will flow back to us for the first couple years, but forever we see you guys as our investments. So we'll do anything we can to help you get a higher salary that comes through a really hard curriculum, so that that the Lambda School brand will mean something when you graduate, and you'll be able to say, hey, I graduated from Lambda School. People will say, holy smokes, that's impressive. So that's why when you guys are running into hard spots, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm barely grasping this. Realize that's why we make everything difficult, so that you guys will be the best and the brightest in the field. And then we'll continue on teaching and training and helping in any way we can, because you are, in a way, our portfolio employees. So you are what makes Lambda School Lambda School. And that angle of education is very different than anything that has ever existed. So we don't see you guys as students that come in and pay a fee and leave. We see you as investments that we're making in people. And that's pretty different. Oh, Javon, let's see. Okay, we'll answer this first. When you came up with the name Lambda School, were you thinking of the tri-lambs? So the name Lambda School comes from something called the Lambda calculus, which is what makes functional programming work, and you guys will learn about functional programming. But basically, it's something that Alan Turing came up with to describe how Turing machines worked. He isn't credited with it, but it was kind of his idea. So you'll learn about the Lambda calculus a little bit when we get into functional programming. But that's where it comes from. It's kind of a high order, really difficult way to program that makes things scale really well. What's an example of a tough question a VC asked you guys in a pitch? So you guys know, the reason you haven't seen me around the past couple weeks is because I have been fundraising all day, every day, talking to every VC in Silicon Valley. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And a lot of them have invested. So that is really good for everybody on this call. An example of a tough call. The hardest ones for me to answer are, why hasn't somebody else done this and made a bunch of money already? And my best answer for that is, I don't know, but they haven't. So by definition, if you're starting a company, you think it's a good idea. And why other people haven't thought it was a good idea, I'm not sure. But we think that matters. Another example would be something like, the hardest one for us to answer right now is, how can you prove to me that you can get Lambda School students jobs? And all of us that are your instructors, most of us that are instructors, we've interviewed developers, we've hired developers, we've trained developers. So we know what that hiring bar is. But for a non-technical VC that doesn't really care about anything that has to do with programming, and they just want to see dollar signs, it's difficult to describe that. So we can say, well, it's because we're better, or because Lambda School is more difficult, or because we can pick the best students from thousands and thousands of applicants. They don't always understand that. So you have to have a VC that gets the vision, and that's what it really comes down to. And luckily we have. We'll go ahead and share it with you guys, just because it matters for you guys. But we originally set out to raise somewhere between $1.5 million and $3 million, and because that would give us basically 3 years. That would let us double our staff, build out the courses, the supplemental courses that we want to, and keep our teacher-student ratio low as we continue to run Lambda School. So that's basically what $1.5 million would get us. Our maximum that we wanted to raise was $3 million, and we have offers for well over $3 million in funding. So Lambda School is going to be around and established for a very long time. We're going to bring in the best instructors anywhere. So we actually just hired the lead instructional designer from Apple. So he has been developing all of their curriculum for colleges and high schools and all that stuff, and he's been teaching his entire life, and he understands code in and out. And he's going to join us and help us make Lambda School better. So those are the types of things that are going to continue happening at Lambda School. And now we haven't announced that yet, but we will have enough to do anything that we possibly need to. So that is really good. What are some of the most important roles at startups besides engineers? Um, Product is a really important one. So people that just help guide and direct product. Another one is growth, which is advertising, marketing, all that stuff kind of wrapped up together. Um, and yeah, by the way, if you guys have any companies that you want to work for or work with, um, we will go out and make those guys hiring partners. So maybe we should start a list somewhere, and I will just start headhunting and going down and finding all the recruiters. We're also toward the end going to have the option for you to do internships for your capstone project. If you want to do that with some company instead of just working on your own project, you can go intern somewhere. We also um, took an investment from a company called Gigster that basically does freelance remote development as a service. So you guys could probably work for Gigster. Um, yep, Gigster. And there's a lot of really cool stuff that is going to be happening. And we'll let you guys know more of that as we go along. We're also going to assign, hopefully, everybody a recruiter. That it's going to be the recruiter's job, and they will get paid based on whether or not they get you a job. So that will be good stuff. So you'll have all of the tools and everything that you need to, yeah, to make that work. Cool. Any other questions? Yeah, in terms of internships. So some of that is still in the works, so I want to be careful here. But we have a few partnerships lined up. One is with so you'll have an option toward the end where you can either work on your own project or you can work on a project that a company has assigned. There's, if it works out for some people, we'll just let you go work at a startup for a while and call that your capstone project. We'll let you know what those relationships are. Those will mostly be in the Bay Area and New York. And you'd have to, some might be paid or pay a living stipend, but some would have to be out of pocket if that's what you want to do. We will have a relationship with the United Nations and their refugee organization. So they have a lot of technology that they need built. So if you want to spend your capstone project helping build apps for refugees and for the UN that will help out the refugees a lot, we'll be able to have that available for you. Or you can just pick your own pet project, or we'll see what we can do around hiring companies. And yeah, there'll be a lot of really good stuff happening. Eventually, this probably won't be by the time you guys graduate, but we're actually going to have a Lambda development shop that you guys can come back and work at, that we're just going to accept work from, and basically own that in-house. And only Lambda School students will be able to work at that development shop. So if you're in between jobs or you just want to get your feet wet coming out, that might not be by the time you guys graduate, but that will be there in the future. So we're going to build a huge ecosystem with a ton of hiring partners, a ton of talent. And by the way, you guys don't have to work at a hiring partner. But yeah, alumni also. But basically, we see our role as making it so that somebody can just show up, and then if you can just make it through Lambda School, you'll have a job. We can't guarantee that yet. We clearly have with our money, but we can't 100% guarantee that. We hope that in the future we'll be able to literally guarantee a job for every Lambda School student and every alumnus. So we're working toward that. Hiring partners. Do you guys know who our hiring partners are? Some of them we haven't been able to talk about publicly. Others we have. So some of the bigger ones are IBM, PayPal, Sling TV, um, Marketo, and then there are about 75 other smaller companies, most of which right now are in the Bay Area, a lot of which are Y Combinator companies. They range from advertising agencies to companies that are building machine learning platforms to it's really all over the place. Companies are trying to make it easier to make ACH payments. Companies that are there's a company that's trying to use stem cells to turn proteins into milk without any cows. So they're a hiring partner. Um, they Yeah, a few are in New York. A lot of them are in San Francisco, New York, which is unfortunate because those are expensive areas. But fortunately, those companies also have to pay the most, so it does balance out to some degree. We're gonna try hard to get companies all over the place, but obviously, if you're in a more rural area, um, we yeah, we'll figure that out. Yeah, we've been talking with Iron Yard a lot. We'll let you know how that goes. But if you guys want to make a list of companies that you want to work at, we can go out and yeah, we'll go out and try to create hiring relationships with all of them. Obviously, no, we can't guarantee that that works, and we can't guarantee you a job, but we will have a team that is 100% in chart. Their only job will be to create hiring partnerships and get you guys jobs. So that will be really cool as we come down to it. Cool. Any more questions? I think I've gone well over my time. Blizzard. Hey, Ivan worked at Blizzard, if you didn't know that. So ask him about Blizzard. Is there consulting in the tech and engineering space? Yeah, consultants get paid a bunch of money. It's a really good place to be. Let's create a Google Doc of the companies, just so I don't have to keep track of everything. So if one of you guys wants to do that, we'll stick our people on it. Yeah, so you guys, things you should be looking for in the next little bit. We'll have a lot more folks coming in. As you get closer to graduation, we'll have a team dedicated to placement. We're also, yeah, there'll be a lot of good stuff going on. Feel free to message me anytime. I am spending most of my time interviewing students now, but we should be pretty much done fundraising, so I'll be much more accessible than I have been in the past. So thanks so much, guys. Yeah, I'll upload this recording right now, and feel free to let me know. I'll stick around in the channel, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks, guys.